Hello, welcome to the Hurricane STEM Science Mitigation Preparedness and Emergency Management Education Learning Module for high school students. I'm meteorologist Eric Solna, and I'm Associate Director of Education and Outreach at the Extreme Events Institute and International Hurricane Research Center at Florida International University in Miami. In this hurricane module for high school students, we're going to learn all about hurricanes and the science, the research, and then how emergency management has a big role to play when it comes to protecting our communities before, during, and after a storm. So we're also going to learn about what does emergency management do and what is their role in the community. And I want to thank, first of all, the Florida Division of Emergency Management, who's made this community education outreach project possible through their support. All right, let's get into it then. First of all, STEM education. A lot of the content we're going to be learning about here is all about STEM, which, as you know, is science, technology, engineering, and math. And we're also going to involve the science of weather, which is meteorology. And when you study meteorology, you're a meteorologist. And that's what I am. And I had to take a lot of math classes and science classes to become a meteorologist. So meteorology is the study of weather and climate across the earth. And it also is a STEM career involving science, technology, engineering, and math for any students who might be interested. So we're going to go through several topics. Topic number one, hurricane science. So when does the hurricane season start and end? Well, we know it starts June 1st and then it ends November 30th. And if you do the math, that's 6 months. That's half the year that we need to be ready in case a storm should come our way. Do we name our hurricanes? And of course we do. And looking back to the 2020 hurricane season, we had a lot of names. This is just a snapshot of the storms that we had last year in 2020. And here are the names. Now there's 6 lists of names that get rotated. So this year's list will get rotated to 6 years later, and so on and so forth. So last year's list, it started with Arthur and ended with Wilfred. But then there were more storms. So we needed more names. So the National Hurricane Center had to go to the backup emergency list, which was the Greek alphabet. So we continued after Wilfred, and we went through Alpha all the way through Iota. And then finally, there were no more storms. We hadn't done this emergency backup Greek list since 2005. So it's the only second time in history that we had to do it. And we're hoping we never have to do it again. And now it's been decided that we're no longer going to use the Greek alphabet as the backup emergency list. They are now going to use a backup list of just names, and just like the other 6 lists, to use in its place, but no more Greek alphabet will be used. So here are the numbers from last year. First of all, let's look at what an average season would bring. Named storms, hurricanes, and majors. We would typically have 12 on average named storms, 6 hurricanes, and of those 3 would become majors, category 3, 4, or 5. But look at 2020, we had 30 named storms, 18 hurricanes, and 6 majors, well above average, a record-breaking season. Now let's look at all the tracks. And if you look at all the tracks, notice a lot of them came through the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico towards the southeast part of the United States. So why did that happen? Well, steering currents. That's a big playmaker and where the storms are going to go. So every hurricane season in the middle of the summer, there's an area of high pressure out in the Atlantic, and it has the nickname the Bermuda High. And as it builds and strengthens, it will then act as a steering current for all the storms. And in 2020, it was positioned just right for most of the season to steer most of the storms our way. So here's an example of one of the storms we had. This is Hurricane Eta. And look at all the moisture spiraling around it. And this was down in Central America. So when we think about a hurricane, how do they form? And when you think about how do they form, you have to think about the recipe. What are the ingredients in the recipe for a hurricane to develop? Well, some of them are listed here. First of all, I have moist atmosphere. and you need a lot of moisture to help fuel and grow those storms and the hurricane. I have warm ocean, that's the fuel to help also make the hurricane grow. And I have low pressure. We need an area of low pressure with a tropical disturbance that'll continue to deepen and strengthen the storm. And then I have here no wind shear. So first of all, what is wind shear? Well, wind shear is when winds change with height in terms of direction and change with height and speed. And that makes things very turbulent. And hurricanes don't like that. They don't want turbulence. So they do not want wind shear. They like a very calm atmosphere above it. And so those are some of the ingredients. And then we get into more of the ingredients in the recipe from 2020. I have here West African monsoon. We have a rainy season every summer. Well, West Africa, their rainy season, they call it a monsoon. And it was very active, bringing energy and moisture into the hurricane season. And also across the Atlantic was a lot of low surface air pressures across the Atlantic toward the Caribbean. And then also here, La Nina. That was in the Pacific. La Nina is when the waters get cold near the equatorial regions of the Pacific. And when you have that, you can have more storms in our hurricane season. So it's very interesting on what happens in the Pacific Ocean can affect what happens in the Atlantic Ocean, all those interconnections. And the opposite of that, by the way, is El Nino. So El Nino is when the waters are very warm, above average in the equatorial areas of the Pacific, and that can make for fewer storms of a hurricane season. But we had La Nina. So when you have all those ingredients and recipe come into play, you'll have a mature hurricane, a structured storm with outflow at the top, spiral bands, an eye in the center, and then it'll start to show its weapons. The weapons of a hurricane: storm surge, rip currents, tornadoes, inland flooding, and of course the strong winds. To measure the winds, we have a scale, and that scale is the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale, category 1 through 5, with 1 being the weakest, 5 being the strongest. And then the other weapon, storm surge. That's when, as a hurricane approaches the coastline, it starts to literally blow and push that water, that ocean water, up along the beaches and start flooding those local coastal communities. That can be life-threatening, and that's why people have to evacuate away from those areas. And when storm surge is a possibility, the National Hurricane Center will start issuing storm surge watches and storm surge warnings. Relatively new terminology in the last several years. Storm surge watch means we could get storm surge within 48 hours. And then the warning means, yes, it's coming, and it's coming within 36 hours. So a lot of people have to evacuate. They have to leave in those coastal communities and go inland out of the storm surge zone, and preferably within the county to a friend's house, a relative's house, or a hotel or motel out of the storm surge zone. Or if need be, start driving farther away to a relative or a friend's house or a hotel, motel. And of course, a hurricane shelter in your local area is another option as well. All right, now one of the other weapons is flooding, inland flooding. When a storm approaches, a hurricane can drop maybe 10, 15, 20 inches or more of rain. That'll make tremendous flooding. So when there is flooding, you don't want to drive through it and you don't want to walk through it because that can be dangerous. And then when there's strong winds out ahead of the storm, it can create rip currents at the beaches. You've probably seen these signs at our local lifeguard stations, and it has a diagram. This diagram is very important. This diagram shows you how to get out of the rip current. So notice you have these arrows showing that if you get caught in a rip current, you start to get pulled back. And I've been caught in one before. I got pulled back into deeper water. And then the natural tendency is to want to just swim against the current. Well, that's the wrong thing to do. Notice the diagram. It has arrows that go to the right or to the left, parallel to the beach. And so to get out of a rip current, you don't want to swim against it. You want to swim out of it, parallel to the beach, and then go back to the beach outside of the rip current, swim to shore. this could save your life one day, and maybe you could help save someone else's life one day. And if you see someone caught in a rip current, you can, if there's a lifeguard on duty, you want to let them know right away. All right, so hurricanes, how do we get information? Well, question I have, does anyone fly into hurricanes? And the answer is yes. They're called the hurricane hunters. And these are the NOAA hurricane hunters. We have a G4 jet, which flies way above the storm to get information. And then we have this other aircraft. This is a P3 aircraft, 4 propellers, and it doesn't fly above the storm. It literally flies through the storm at about 10,000 feet in altitude because they want to get information and they want to get into the eye. That's what they're looking for. That's what their mission is. And when they get into the eye, look at this picture. Amazing. If you've ever been at a football game and you're in the middle of the field at the 50-yard line and you look all around and see the stadium, well, that's the nickname of the inside of the eye, the stadium effect. And it's clear above, but then you see the stadium all around you, which is the eye wall of the storm, the most dangerous part of any hurricane. That aircraft, to get to this eye, had to fly through their eye wall, and it's extremely dangerous. It's like a roller coaster times 10 sometimes. Think of it, they're all buckled in and they're bouncing around to get to the eye. It's a very dangerous mission, but they're doing because we need that information to help predict intensity and track. And once they get through the eye, then they have to go through the other side and hit the eye wall again. Here's another picture, really cool picture, showing you how clear skies above with the sunshine and the clear conditions. So this is how they're getting the data. This is an instrument package that they literally drop out of the rear of the aircraft and has a parachute. So once it comes out of the back end of the plane, it starts floating, floating, floating all the way down to the ocean surface. And while it's doing that, it's collecting data, collecting information. And the way it's doing it by instruments inside this tube, so it's collecting temperature, relative humidity, its pressure, air pressure, and as it falls, its trajectory will give us wind speed and direction. All of that information is electronically sent to the aircraft, which then goes to the National Hurricane Center on the campus of FIU, and then also gets shared with the National Weather Service and NOAA in Washington, D.C. with their super weather computers so they can try and predict what the storm is going to do. Another way they can get data is with drones, and they're doing research with these drones, flying at the lowest levels of the storm, the most dangerous part of the storm, to get information as well. And again, that's shared with this building located on the campus of FIU. It's the National Hurricane Center, and they forecast our storms during hurricane season. And it's co-located with another special office, the National Weather Service Miami office. And I do want to point out something here I'll talk about later. Notice how this building is constructed, all concrete. It needs to be resilient. The storm should come our way and come to FIU. This building has to be strong and resilient as they continue to forecast inside the hurricane track and intensity. So when a storm is coming, you'll see a forecast cone, probably see them on television. So how is that cone created? Well, first of all, here's the cone, typical of what you'll see. This was Hurricane Irma's cone in 2017. And notice how the cone came right over South Florida. And notice in the cone, you have these black dots. That shows us positions every 12 hours or 24 hours in time. And then there's a little letter in the middle, and M stands for major. It was predicting to be a major storm up until South Florida, which it was. And then these areas in red show where the hurricane warnings are located. So how do we create that cone? Well, remember that drops on getting all that data and information. It's being fed into computer models. These computer models will use lots of math and physics to try and predict track and intensity. And you see all these lines. These are all different computer models trying to forecast the track of the storm. Now, we wish there was one computer model that was the best, and that's what you would see on TV. And then all you would see is a skinny black line. Well, we just don't have one best model yet. So we have a bunch of models that we compare, and the only thing the National Hurricane Center can do is encircle all those tracks to create the cone. So that's what it shows us, but what it doesn't show us is details of the hazards. Where are the heavy rains going to be? What's the extent of the storm surge going to be? And for that, you need to look at other kinds of graphics, hazard graphics, to see details of the hazards, which the cone does not show. Some people think if I'm not in the cone, I'm not going to get a hazard. Well, that's not true. Cone is just showing you where the storm may be located in geography, but it's not talking about these hazards. And hurricane watches and warnings, knowing the difference of what it means when a storm is coming. Again, a hurricane watch, conditions are possible in 48 hours, hurricane conditions. And then the hurricane warning means hurricane conditions are expected in 36 hours. So for that detailed information about the storm, you go to your local National Weather Service office web site. And in this case, I have the Miami National Weather Service, and they will have specific graphics, specific information local to your area. So very critically important. So it's an excellent source to go to get that specific information. All right, now from hurricane science, let's go to hurricane research, which is what we do at FIU. And a part of this has to do with wind engineering, which is another STEM career opportunity for students: science, technology, engineering, and math. So wind engineering is a part of civil engineering. Engineering dealing with how we can create things and develop things and build things in the built environment. So there are many parts of civil engineering, and there's structural engineering, and below that is wind engineering. And that's what we do at FIU. And as an engineer and as a student in engineering, you're going to learn about structural mechanics and meteorology and fluid mechanics. You're also going to learn about pressures, how wind forces push on a structure, a home or a building, and give positive or negative pressures. You'll learn all about that. And then how structures can behave differently against hurricane winds. That all has to do with aerodynamics and the shape and how is it mitigated. And all that comes into play when trying to build a stronger structure. And how we do that at FIU is with this, the wall of wind. It's 12 giant fans where we can create a Category 5 hurricane over 157 miles per hour, and we'll add water into the system to replicate rain as much as 8 to 9 inches per hour. It's part of a national network through the National Science Foundation called FIU-IHRC, and it's an experimental facility. We're one of many across the country doing wind engineering research. Now here's a video that'll teach us more about the wall of wind.
The 12-fan wall of wind facility at FIU, which we call the WOW, is the largest and most powerful hurricane simulation facility in a university setting that can simulate Category 5 hurricane wind, the highest rating on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale.
The wall of wind allows for wind loading experiments on various structures at multiple scales. And because it is an open jet facility, it is capable of doing destructive testing on structures to study their failure and collapse modes without the risk of damaging the wind tunnel. The wall of wind can do holistic system level testing. That means we can test structures with the components and connections as integral part of those structures and study the system level performance. We can also look at wind-driven rain intrusion into actual building envelope, and we can study progressive damage of the system. So this is a new way of looking at hurricane impacts on building systems, because building envelopes are one of the most vulnerable elements in hurricanes.
Here in the control room for the wall of wind, we can monitor a lot of the systems that are part of the wall of wind, but we can also control them. We can control our pressure scanning systems, wind speed measurement devices, load cells, force balances, transducers, and a lot of many other instruments that we have available in this facility. We also have a system with high definition cameras that we can see over here and record when a part of the model failed and how it failed.
Our safety program includes personnel safety, which includes trainings through the Environmental Health and Safety Department within Florida International University. Also includes safety protocol to ensure the safety of all equipment within the wall of wind.
The wall of wind is a very versatile wind testing facility. It can test up to speeds that are equivalent to Category 5 hurricane speeds, 160 miles an hour. And it also simulates the wind profile and turbulence of natural winds very well. So we have already tested and we will continue to test a wide variety of different research projects in this facility. For example, we have tested full-scale systems for roofing, like standing seam metal roofs, roof paving systems, tiles, shingles, and so on. Those can be tested essentially at full scale, and it allows us to look at the way the whole system performs under wind loading, as well as its interaction with the wind loading. So that's a very important role of this facility. We also have been developing techniques that are applicable to smaller structures, which we call partial turbulence simulation, which allows us to put relatively large-scale models in the facility, and we combine the test data with other analysis and computational methods to give us predictions that include all the big-scale turbulence that we may not be able to include at that scale in this facility. We've done testing related to the transportation industry. One example would be variable message signs. We've done a project here with the PhD students whereby we've refined the aerodynamic coefficients used in the AASHTO code and the gust factors, and we've looked at the phenomena of vortex shedding and galloping, which could cause vibrations of these structures at high wind speeds. That's another example of the application of this kind of facility.
One of the most important aspects of wind engineering research is related to codification of research findings. So here at the Wall of Wind, we test small, large, and full-scale models in order to extract those important information that we can use in order to enhance current building codes and wind standards. The codification process in these type of studies has a direct impact on people's safety and economic development of our community.
So the STEM Transformation Institute makes use of this classroom to allow students to learn about their sciences in the classroom as scientists. In this case, this is a bridge between the Wall of Wind and students learning in the classroom. So it brings the Wall of Wind straight into this classroom where students are going to learn about it through this active learning process.
Wall of Wind was used to develop and validate various innovative mitigation techniques for lessening hurricane impacts on structures. One example is the validation of aero edge, which are edge devices that can be put on roof to reduce the wind uplift damage on roof components. This product was developed by the industry partner of the Wall of Wind and has been patented. Wall of Wind has proved to be a multi-user research infrastructure, both for national and international researchers.
The vision of the Wall of Wind facility is to significantly advance the state-of-the-art in wind engineering research and education, and to impart resiliency and sustainability to new and existing buildings, cladding systems, and lifeline infrastructure, so as to prevent wind hazards from becoming disasters.
All right, very good. Now that you've gotten an overview about the Wall of Wind, this next video is more of a specific project that we did. It was a demonstration video. I'll start it here, and this video will just talk about, we'll see the project. There's no sound, so I'm going to talk over it. So a media team wanted to come and see a structure blown apart. And we said, okay, we understand that, but we want to show you how we can keep structures from being blown apart, how we can prevent damage, how we can mitigate. So that's what we did. So here's the media team. We're all getting ready for the big special demonstration. So we created a special house. There it is. And we created a strong side and a weak side. This is the strong side where we had metal shutters on the windows and then metal straps in the hurricane straps holding the roof down. Then we had the weak side that had no shutters and no roof tie downs. So we hit the strong side first with up to Category 4 hurricane force winds. And look, really nothing happened because mitigation works. We can be more resilient. So we spun the building around now to the weak side with no shutters and no roof tie downs, and watch what happened. Catastrophic failure. Instantly. Watch that roof flying over almost 200 feet in the air. Watch all the flying debris. And that's what happens when buildings start to blow apart during a hurricane. So showing here dramatically what can happen to structures that are not reinforced, strengthened, and mitigated. And there's that roof. It flew 200 feet in the air and got stopped by a concrete safety wall. So very effective demonstration. The media got what they wanted, which was a building getting blown apart, but we got what we wanted, a teachable moment showing you how to prevent damage. And that's what we do at the Wall of Wind and what's so very important. So when you have wind hitting a structure, wind engineers learn about positive and negative forces depending on where that wind is hitting. And then we learn about roof types and what does better in a hurricane force wind. And I have here a diagram. This is a gable roof at the top. In the middle, we have a hip roof and then a flat roof. Well, which one does best in a hurricane wind, do you think? And the answer is the hip roof, because it has slopes on all four sides and it's more aerodynamic. Wind goes up and over, up and over. And again, we talked about how wind engineers, that's what they learn when they study wind engineering. So now let's look at some case examples. This was Hurricane Irma in 2017 that we mentioned with the cone, and it hit down into the Florida Keys. But I wanted to show you this. Look at these buildings. The building in the middle was built to a newer, what's called a building code. It's what the requirement is on building that home to make it strong. And in 2014, we had a strong building code. But notice the building on the right and the left. Those were built in the 1980s. Their building codes were not as strong. They were weaker. And look, the buildings were damaged. So this shows how we have learned over time with education and research and understanding how we can build stronger buildings to make them more resilient. Here's another example, Hurricane Michael, which was up in the panhandle of Florida. Same illustration, the building in the middle, built to a 2017 building code, and look on either side. Those buildings are gone, built to 1980s building codes. Again, showing the example that building codes work. Florida is the leader in building codes, and this is a great way to prevent damage in communities. All right, from hurricane science to hurricane research, now let's go to hurricane mitigation and preparedness. So what is wind mitigation? Well, it's a lot of what we've been talking about, how we can protect your home or school from hurricane winds. So this is a famous picture taken in the upper Texas coast. You see that house? It's standing there, again, built code plus, very strong. It survived a hurricane when none of the other homes did. And it shows us for every $1 we spend on mitigation saves at least $6 in damage and cleanup. So that makes good financial sense to do it. We talked about how we hold the roof down with those metal straps up in the attic. If you go up in the attic here in Florida, you'll see these metal straps, and they really do a great job of holding the roof in place. Now, another area of concern in a house is if they have a big garage door. That could be a weak link, so to speak. If the garage door fails, wind gets in the garage and then can take out the roof. So we have strong, mitigated, code-approved garage doors that are reinforced. So very important to protect that large opening. And of course, flying debris, flying everywhere, as we saw from that media demonstration video. And this is what happened during Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. Look at the flying debris and these 2x4s flying through palm trees. So we know we need to protect our windows, and we have choices. To the left is wood, plywood. To the right is metal, a metal shutter. So what's stronger? Well, it's obvious metal is stronger, and that's the recommendation. We're wanting everyone to protect their windows with the strongest product possible. Metal will do a very good job. This plywood, well, it's an option and people do use it, but notice, remember that I showed you that 2x4 that went through the palm tree? Well, that 2x4 on a major hurricane, Cat 4, Cat 5, that'll go right through the plywood as well, but it won't go through the metal. So very important. And then there's something you should not use. Tape. Tape does nothing. Do not use tape. That's old education. We have new education. And we used to, all of us, many of us did it many years ago, but we know it does nothing. So don't use tape. It's a waste of time. It's no way going to stop flying debris. And when the power goes out, how do you see in your house at night? Well, flashlights are better than candles because candles can start a fire in a house. And another way, to give you power is a portable generator to give you light in the house. But should you run that inside or outside of your house? And the answer is very important for all of us to understand generator safety. Never run a generator inside a home because of that deadly carbon monoxide gas. Always run it outside of the home. And of course, we all need our hurricane survival kit items: food, can opener, water, gas, flashlights, batteries, all these things to ride out the storm and through the hurricane season. And now we'll go to our fourth and last topic, and this is emergency management. So we've learned all about the hurricane science and the research and preparedness, and now emergency management. Who are they? What do they do? They have a very special role in our community in helping us before, during, and after a storm. So emergency management, many of us, here's the structure, have heard of FEMA. That's at the federal level. But from FEMA, you go to state emergency management. And like I said, this project, this module, graciously supported by the Florida Division of Emergency Management. And from there, you go to the county level, county emergency management. And from there, you can even then go to the city level. So what do they do? Well, emergency management is a very important role in local government. At the local level, emergency management is responsible for providing overall pre-disaster planning and other programs such as training and exercises for natural hazard events and man-made disasters that can affect a community. So emergency management coordinates the preparedness, response, and recovery actions needed for a large-scale event such as a hurricane to ensure that they are safeguarded and property is protected. Very important. So in emergency management, you're going to have a director, and that director provides the recommendations to the head of the local government, for example, the mayor or administrators, and who make decisions on what courses of action to take to prepare for an event that is about to happen. For example, like a hurricane or a flood. So examples of these actions might be the emergency management director may order evacuations of vulnerable populations, ordering the opening of evacuation shelters. Other decisions to be made are activating the Emergency Operations Center to coordinate these actions. So what is an emergency management or emergency operations center? Well, it's where everyone comes together. You need a meeting place. You need a big area of operations. And this is an example of the Miami-Dade County Emergency Operations Center and showing how big it is. And this is where all the people needed during a hurricane threat to come together. And this is another STEM career opportunity to think about for students, emergency management. So that Emergency Operations Center, it's a safe facility from which emergency operations can be directed and coordinated. So in the EOC, officials are receiving information related to emergency incident, decision makers, response agencies, volunteer agencies, and any other group with significant response roles to support the emergency response from the EOC. So they all come to that EOC. So now I'm going to describe to you the student activity. Now that we've learned all about the hurricane information and then the role of emergency management, this is the activity for the high school students. After learning all of this content from the teacher, the activity is for students to assume the role, pretend you're the emergency management director in your local county. And you're going to do a Zoom video of yourself, just like you're watching right here, with a PowerPoint, and you're going to give a media conference, no longer than 5 to 10 minutes. But at that media conference, you're going to talk about the threatening hurricane before landfall, what would typically be done at the county EOC with media and various county officials in attendance. And the presentation would include things like a brief hurricane weather briefing, and then information related to county preparations and evacuations. So put yourself in that position as the emergency management director. And now you have to, before the storm makes landfall, and give all the information about what the county response is going to be and evacuations and where's the storm, how strong is it going to be, and give that media briefing. So that's the activity related to this hurricane module. Now the student activity, the details to help you do the activity, it's on a separate module on our webpage, and look for the student activity for the hurricane module and call that module up, and it'll now give you more detailed information on doing this particular activity. We really look forward to your participation in this module and looking forward to your feedback as teachers, feedback from students, and certainly some of the videos of the students actually then taking on the role of an emergency management director. Now, the rest of this module, I'll share with you a few additional resources to help you. And this is one resource called Eye of the Storm. It's a 12-part hurricane education video series, lots of content, everything that I covered here. And you go to this website, it's the Museum Discovery and Science. They were a partner with FIU and Florida Division of Emergency Management in creating this hurricane video series. This will help you give lots of great background about each and every topic I covered in this module. And for high school students, I just want to mention that at FIU, we have an annual event, an annual competition called the Wall of Wind Challenge. It's all for high school students, where you can create a structure for the challenge and then get it tested in the real wall of wind as part of a competition. And so it typically, we have judges, and we have a challenge that's given to the teams, and you'll do 3 components. You'll do a technical paper, an oral presentation, and then do an actual physical structure to be tested by the wall of wind. And that's how, those are the main components of the Wall of Wind Mitigation Challenge. There's a video that you can go to on YouTube showing you a previous Wall of Wind Mitigation Challenge that you can look at later to see what they're like. And if you want more information about this challenge, you can contact me. There's my email and phone number. And there's the webpage for the challenge. And this module, if you have any questions or comments, please contact me for that as well. And once again, we'd like to thank the Florida Division of Emergency Management for graciously supporting this community education outreach project. You can go to their website too for information. So thank you all once again for participating in this hurricane module experience, and looking forward to your feedback. Thank you very much.